Hello, fellow Planeswalkers. It's Scott, and we're back with the weekend's The Lost Caverns of Ixalan spoilers. We got a small number of cards, but some very interesting ones, and I think the dinosaurs that we might need to make dinosaurs a real deck in Standard. Before we get started, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this, and special thanks to Caffeinated Gamers for sponsoring this video. So let's dive in to The Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So first we got our fourth creature land in Restless Vents. It produces black and red mana, and for one, a black and a red. Until the end of turn, Restless Vents becomes a 2/3 black and red insect creature with menace. It's still a land, and whenever Restless Vents attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So we've already got some cards in Standard from the set that want you to discard a card. So I think this works really well with that ability, and it's also on another red card. So I think that combination will be an interesting one in Standard to trigger that ability regularly when you're in the mid to late game. Next, we've got the Magmatic Galleon for 3 and 2 red mana. We get a rare for the day, which is a vehicle. It's a 5/5, and when Magmatic Galleon enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target creature an opponent controls. And whenever one or more creatures your opponent controls are dealt excess combat damage, create a treasure token, and it accrues for 2. So I think this is an interesting vehicle. First of all, we've seen this ability before, but on a red dragon and demanding dragon, where it comes into play and does 5 damage to a creature. It was also 5 mana, but obviously it's a 5/5 dragon and it had flying, so it's a little bit different. But I like the ability that if you're dealing excess combat damage to an opponent, you get to create some treasure. So building up stuff. So even if this is 5 mana, do some damage, and probably use to crew one of your smaller creatures. Then you got a 5/5 attacker, so that's a threat to your opponent. And I think that might make it playable in Standard in the right kind of deck. And I think the thing that really is the most important thing here is the fact that it does that 5 damage to a creature. Otherwise, I don't see it seeing much play at all in Standard. Next, we've got our first 2-drop dinosaur from the set. Belligerent Yearling for 1 and a red. You get a dinosaur. It's a 3/2 with trample. And whenever another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Belligerent Yearling's base power become equal to that creature's power until the end of turn. So I really like this card, and the thing I like about it more than anything else, it's an uncommon. One of the problems that we've had with decks in general over the last couple of years is the overwhelming majority of cards are going to be rares that end up in the better decks in Standard. What we're seeing from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan is good uncommon dinosaurs that are playable, and I really like that from a playability standpoint. So budget players can have a competitive deck potentially within Standard, and I think this one, because you can grow its power when you cast another dinosaur. We're going to see some creatures in just a moment that are dinosaurs that have 5 toughness, and I think because we're going to see those on turn 3 and on turn 4 and on turn 5, I think that's going to make this a very interesting card in Standard that's going to be able to, potentially attack through early in the game to do a decent amount of damage, and then maybe in the late game be able to trample through for that last bit of damage that wins the game because of that ability. Next, we've got Rampaging Ceratops for 4 and a red mana. You get a dinosaur. That's a 5/4. This is one of the ones I was talking about with the added, power ability coming in on Belligerent Yearling. But what I'm really excited about, again, it's another uncommon, and Rampaging Ceratops can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. So if you get this in, once you get this in play and can attack with it, if your opponent wants to block it, they're gonna have to block with 3 creatures, or they're gonna have to have spot removal for it. And in that part of the game when we're probably playing this, most opponents have probably exhausted their direct damage, direct removal spells that might get rid of this. So I have a feeling that this is going to be a very good card in the mid to late game when you play it. Next turn you attack with it, and your opponent just can't block it, and it does 5 damage to your opponent. Next, we've got Dactyl. For 2 and 2 green mana, we get a dinosaur. It's a 4/5. It has reach and trample. Again, another good dinosaur. That's an uncommon. It's 4 mana, but the thing I like about this one, just like with Belligerent Yearling, it has trample. The fact that this one has reach is also important because we do have a decent amount of flyers in standard. So I think this is another card that will be considered for the dinosaur deck. Next, we've got Pathfinding Axejaw for 3 and a green mana. You get a dinosaur. That's a 4/3. And when Pathfinding Axejaw enters the battlefield, it explores. So not a whole lot of special to it, but you get to explore. That means you're going to get a land, or you're going to get a +1/+1 counter on Pathfinding Axejaw. And again, that would trigger Belligerent Yearling's ability to increase its power. So I think if we have another 1 or 2 playable 1 or 2 drop dinosaurs, then I think the pieces are there to really have a strong dinosaurs deck, because we've already got a bunch of quality 3-drop dinosaurs from previous sets, and we have gotten already several really good dinosaurs from this set, and I think the combination of things is going to make a Gruul Dinosaurs deck a playable deck in Standard. Next, we've got Nikanzel, Current Conductor for a blue and a green mana. You get a Merfolk Scout, who's a legendary creature, and a 2/3. And whenever a creature you control explores a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. And whenever a creature you control explores a non-land card, put a +1/+1 counter on Nikanzel, Current Conductor. So I'm very interested in this card's playability. It looks like, to me, this is potentially, in an Explorer build, you're going to have that to make this work. But in a good Explorer build, this is going to be a very powerful card. We've already got a number of good Explorer cards already from the set. And because of that, I think this is an easy include in any Explorer deck, or any deck that is going to be built around the Explorer mechanic, or even built around gaining map tokens so that you can explore. And because of that, I think this is going to be a card that's going to be very interesting to see where it slots in Standard. Next, we've got Enterprising Scallywag. For 1 and a red mana, you get a Goblin Pirate. That's a 2/2. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, create a treasure token. So again, another piece that is designed to help another deck. If you have a descend deck, this is going to create more mana for you because you're going to create those treasure tokens. So again, it's going to be, if we have a dedicated descend deck, this is a nice piece for that as a 2-drop. And then every time you descend, you get a treasure token at the end of your turn. Next, we've got Bloodthorn Flail. For a black mana, you get an artifact. That's an equipment. An equipped creature gets +2/+1, and to equip it, you can pay 3 or discard a card. So not a great one, but it is 1 mana. It is a 2/1, and I think this is definitely something in Limited you would probably want to be playing. Next, we've got Market Gnome. For a white mana, you get an artifact creature. That's a gnome. That's a 0/3, and when Market Gnome dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. When Market Gnome is exiled from the battlefield while you're activating a craft ability, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So basically, as long as you're not losing Market Gnome to an exile ability of a removal spell, you're going to gain a life and you get a card. So for 1 mana, I think this is a nice little package that we see in Market Gnome. And now, I think this really actually works nice with Dust Rose Reliquary, which is also 1 white mana, and as an artifact, and as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or a creature. So in this situation, I think you can play these two cards together, and they do a great job of providing you with the tool you need to get Dust Rose Reliquary down, and then in addition to that, you're going to gain a life and draw a card. So what does Dust Rose Reliquary do? Well, it has Ward 2, and then when Dust Rose Reliquary enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until Dust Rose Reliquary leaves the battlefield. And there is a little bit of artifact removal in Standard, but not a tremendous amount at this point. So I think white decks that are going to have the ability to sacrifice an artifact or a creature, this is a very cost-effective one-drop that will take out the best creature your opponent has, and because of that, I think this is going to be playable in a wide variety of decks in Standard. Next, we've got Drowsing Device. For 1 and a red mana, you get an artifact, and whenever Drowsing Device or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, up to 1 target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Then transform Drowsing Device if you control 4 or more artifacts. So I really like this card, and we've already got cards like our vampires, Innistrad block that create blood tokens. We've got other spells that are going to create artifact, are going to create map tokens or treasures. So I think there's going to be a lot of ways to activate this. And in a deck where you want your creatures to attack quickly, I think this is a interesting inclusion in that type of deck. Now, is it a 4-of in a deck? Probably not. And is it going to be something that you're going to have to build around to make it work? Probably. And for that reason, I don't see it having a lot of play in Standard, but I think there might be a deck out there that could use this ability. Now, if you do use it and you do transform it, you get Geodead Grotto. It's a land, it's also a cave, so maybe our cave deck would want this. It produces red mana, and for 2 and a red mana until end of turn, target creature gains haste and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of artifacts you control, activate only as a sorcery. So I like the backside ability here, where you can play a creature, if you've got 3 mana left, then you can go ahead and activate this ability, and it's going to gain haste and get a boost to its power on that turn as well, and that can be game ending in the right build. All right, our next card is Clay Fired Bricks. For 1 and a white mana, you get another artifact, and when Clay Fired Bricks enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic playing card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. You gain 2 life. So if we have a deck that feels like it needs to have land draw in it, I think this is a card that does that okay. The fact that it gains 2 life could be important as well, because we do have a number of cards in Standard that want you to gain life to improve abilities, so this could potentially fit in there. I don't think the craft ability is realistic, because you craft with an artifact for 5 and 2 white mana, and when you do, you get Cosmium Kiln, and when Cosmium Kiln enters the battlefield, you create 2 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens, and creatures you control get +1/+1. So I think creating 2 gnomes and having your creatures get +1/+1, I think there's just better ways of doing that in Standard. So I don't think this has a lot of real Standard playability, but in Limited, I think it's a card that you may want for the front side. All right, and that's it for the weekend spoilers. We didn't get a lot, but we got some interesting things. I hope you like the dinosaur cards, and I'm excited about the possibility of creating that solid dinosaur deck from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. All right, tomorrow we'll be back with more spoilers, and I will see you then. And again, remember, like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Thanks, and I'll see you tomorrow.